Welcome to another exciting mystery solving video. These are the sites that we will cover today in this study. So we've got Stonehenge is the main one, but we'll take a look at a few others. If you have a look at the UK, it's full of strange sites. You'll see that some sites are stone rings, some of them are raised mountains, some of them right next to rivers, and some of them look like little islands. These are clues. Some of them I've found are even on islands. Around Scotland there's all these little islands with stuff on them, so I certainly do have my work cut out for me. Let's start by taking a look at the clues, see what's going on here. Right, so the first thing we need to do is zoom in. Now, before we zoom in up there, just notice how close it is to meridian 0. Stonehenge is in fact 1.83 degrees west of Greenwich Meridian. Okay, so there it is down there. Let's zoom in, take a look at this site. So let's drop a man down here and see what we can see. Okay. Alright, so let me ask you, what is the difference between this stone here on the ground and this one standing up and this one here on top? What is the difference? The difference is this stone at the top, it has been elevated. It has risen. It is higher up, and that is a clue. Let's go back to the top view so we can see some of the other stones surrounding this stone circle. Okay, so you have the stone circle here. It has something going on in the middle. Can you see around at 4 quadrants, there's a healing stone up here. They call this the healing stone. Then there is 4 stones around it, and there's an altar stone. So what I've done to help us understand what this site looks like is I've created this little 3D model. So this is east-west and this is north and south. If we zoom in down here, basically there's the healing stone. We have this ridge going around, but the ridge is not a full complete ring. It's separated. If we zoom in down here, now if we take a look at the height, do you see how the healing stone is looking down this passage? And the inner horseshoe shape inside one is taller. There's a height difference here. So it looks almost like this stone going down a passageway and looking at, what is this, a doorway, a gateway, a portal? Over the years, some stones scientists have detected, some of them are different years. We'll get into the years later. Now, the other main thing about this site is that many pigs' bones have been found. In fact, 3,800 dead animals have been found and their bones, and 10% are cattle and ox. 90% is pigs. Now, there's also human bones around here. The animal bones that have been found around this site does make you think, is this referring to 70 shepherds? Now, the diameter of this circle is 33 meters. 33 is the Aramaic word for stone ring, and 99, which is another measurement here of the ring ditch, is 99 meters, and that is 220 cubits, which in Hebrew is stall or cattle pen. So this is another clue. Somebody's done us this nice diagram, drawing, and basically you don't have 2 rings of stones here. There is 1 ring, but these ones are sitting on top of these ones. Basically, you have 30 stones standing upright, and on top of them, you have another 30 stones forming the lintels on top. Now, these outside ones they call them the Saracen stones, and the inside is the trilithon. You can see the horseshoe shape here. This is where the healing stone looks down, and these are the taller. Then you have these 15, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You have 15 around there. There's an altar stone, and you have 4 other stones down here. Now, the whole thing is this way is not north, as I've just demonstrated. The whole thing is switched around anti-clockwise, 130 degrees. So it's actually like this. Here you have the healing stone up there in the top right, and is looking down this passage. Now the sun ends up right between these 2 stones. So what is the impression it's giving you here? Like these stones have a doorway, or is this a gateway or something like that? You get this impression. Now what's going on with the sun wrapping around? Basically, the solar cycle, this full cycle of the sun goes from one side of this stone circle to the other. And it marks the solstices, both the summer and the winter solstices, and the equinoxes. So basically the sun goes from the northeastern side until it reaches winter, which is the southwestern side. The healing stone is at a bearing of 49 degrees, and the whole site is facing, the trilithon is facing 229 degrees bearing. So that is exactly a 180 degree difference. So it really is like the healing stone is looking down this passage. Summer solstice starts by shining its light on the healing stone. And then by the time you get all the way around to the winter, it ends up through this doorway. So it might make you think that as the sun is wrapping around, going between these uprights, gives you the impression that these are like portals of fire. In winter, the azimuth of the sun, so 129 degrees, with the sun wrapping around, the solstice is 2 seasons. 2 seasons is basically a solstice. So when you have 2 solstices, what's that saying? It's saying a full year cycle. A full year cycle is 365 days. In the 129th passage in the Bible, where the sun angle, the azimuth that it reaches in winter, the winter solstice reaches 129 degrees. The 129th passage in the Bible says 365. So that must have something to do with it, with this 365 notion going on here. Now, 365 is also a prominent number you can get by multiplying the outside stones by the inside stones. 365 is not the only measurement you get with the stones. If you measure the circumference of this ring, if we zoom out here, okay, so this ring here, this ring that's going around with the gap, if you calculate the circumference excluding the gap, you get 365. Reeds is a unit of measure they used to use a very long time ago, a very early form of measurement is reeds. This is giving you an idea of how old this site is. Now, 365, 364 there's many other ways you can get this measurement. For example, Stonehenge's location on the Earth. If you measure the distance with the North Pole and you take the distance from the South Pole and you divide it, you get the ratio of 364. In other words, if you take the North Stonehenge to the North Pole, if you take that slice of the Earth, it fits into the southern part exactly 3.64 times. Now, the other interesting clue is that where the sun sets, the full moon pops up right opposite. Full moon is right opposite where the sun sets. Now, the new moon follows the sun down, and these are all clues. Clues. Now, the stone alignments are marking, as I said, the solstices, but also the equinoxes. And basically what it's doing, the stone positions are dividing half the site into 6 parts and the other half into another 6 parts. So it's dividing the whole ring by 12 parts. Now, if you use the stone count, you can calculate not 6 and 6, but 6 and 12 and 6. So you got this 18-part division when you take the stone counts, the stone numbers. So it's important to understand the difference between the stone positions and the calculated stone counts. The stone counts gives you a division of 18, 6 and 12, 12 and 6. And that's another clue. The other interesting thing about this site is that as I mentioned, this ring is 99 meters. Now, this whole site is also 99 meters above sea level. So we have this 99 thing going on here. What's that all about? If you speak to a mathematician and ask them, say, what is 99 squared? Why is that an interesting number? And they will tell you, because if you square 99, or you multiply it by itself, or you reverse its result and add it to itself, basically you always get a result of 1089. And 33 squared is also 1089. So we got a heavy emphasis on the number 1089. 1089 is Hebrew gematria for gate of heaven. So it brings us back to this. Is this depicting a gate of heaven idea? 1089 is exactly the difference of 3 between 1092 and 1089. Now 1092 is 3-year cycles. 364 times 3 is 1092. Now 1092 and 1089 in the Hebrew language, there are 3 words and they basically link back to each other. Now in Greek, 1092 is a word that Jesus used many times to describe God. For instance, here in John 15, he describes this as the gardener, or the farmer, the husbandman, the tiller of soil. And this is another clue as to what this site means. The other thing I noticed is that if you take 7,000 and you add it to 1092, you get the exact distance between the North Pole and Easter Island. And Easter Island has this 5,001 times pi. So Easter Island is sitting on a position on the Earth that forms a perfect calculated ratio with the Earth's curvature. So these are all clues. Clues. Now, you might argue with me and say, oh, no, these numbers here, 99, 33, 77, the distance to the heel stone from the center of the site is 77 meters. Now, you can also calculate from the stone count, 106, Jesus' number, as I've described in other videos. We also get a 358, which is the measurement between Stonehenge and Greenwich Meridian, the opposite way around the Earth. Now, 358 is the word Messiah in Hebrew. So you might think, well, this is depicting Jesus here, but it's not. This is just another clue. Clues to what the site really is and what it means. Now, over Stonehenge, the sun passes over this way. Okay, this is basically, it's winter, which is the furthest way, and the closest summer. Basically, if you align your head so you're perfectly centered, when you are back, you're going to see this sun part. Okay, but if you tilt your head forward and you put your nose on the spot in the center of Stonehenge, facing south, you're going to see the sun here. The sun's going to become closer and bigger. And if you tilt your head back, then you see this. So tilt your head forward again, and you see this, and back. So basically, over the years, this is what's happening. The Earth is moving closer to the sun and then further back. Closer and then further back. We are kind of breathing in and out, in and out. The moon does the same flyover over Stonehenge's position, basically in a month cycle, not a year cycle. The sun does a 1 year cycle, the moon does a 1 month cycle. Interest's sake, I thought I'd just add in Mars. What does Mars look like over Stonehenge? And basically Mars is half as slow as us, and it's flying around the back of us. So basically, when we look at Mars is always growing on us. It's getting bigger. It's like coming for us. Mars is going to crash into us. That's the impression Mars gives us. Now, since Mars is a destroyed world, thematically, that should scare you. I thought I'd just throw in Jupiter. Now, Jupiter over Stonehenge, basically for 2 years, you're going to see it there. For 4 years, you're going to see it there. For 4 years, you're going to see it there. And for 2 years, you're going to see it there. Basically, Jupiter does a 12-year cycle over Stonehenge. Now, basically, 8 and 4, you may say the divine coming to the earthly realm. Summing up, 8 plus 4 is 12. So is the divine coming to the earthly realm to rescue the chosen, God's people? That's one way of looking at it. Now, what is this site telling us? What is all this evidence pointing us towards? Enoch. Enoch was this man who was seventh after Adam and Eve. And Enoch has all these visions. He sees the future. He sees the final judgment. And Enoch's father was the time period where the Watchers came to the earth and did their deeds, and they were punished by God. And the Watchers asked Enoch to go and petition on their behalf with God, because they could see how much God liked Enoch. And basically, Enoch, he sees all these visions of the luminaries, so he gets an explanation of how the timing is with the planets and the cosmos going around us. And he sees the Son of Man, the elect one, the Holy One, come to the earth. And he prophesies about Jesus. The earliest prophecy of Jesus coming to the earth was Enoch. Enoch's prophecy was the first. So we have all these others. We have the beasts. Now, the beasts and the apocalypse. This is, one of them's Russia, one of them's China, the other one's Iran, the other one's Turkey. These are all the countries that Satan has taken over. Okay, and he describes it as the beasts of the earth rising up. And he sees Noah's flood. So basically, Enoch sees all of it. And he records it. He writes this down. Enoch has his own book, the Book of Enoch, which is not captured in the Bible, but neither is King Solomon's books. There are several books outside the Bible which you can rely on, but were not included. They are very detailed. And now Enoch is captured in the Holy Bible, but just not his own books. So let's take a look at Enoch's identity. So if you calculate the mass of all the stones, I get 1,802 long tons. Now, the Greek number 1082 is Enoch. If you calculate the volume of one of the top 30 lintels each, it's 2,585 liters. That is the Hebrew number for the word Enoch. And if you take the coordinates of Stonehenge, the longitude coordinates, and you sum them together, you get 84. 84 is the Hebrew gematria number for Enoch. If you sum up the volume of all the stones put together, I get a total of 298,000 ohms. Basically, it's very close to 300,000. And Enoch walked with God for 300 years. If you measure the solar sweep, the total sweep across from winter to summer that the sun makes, it is 78 degrees. 78 is the Hebrew number for the word dedicate. And Enoch was very dedicated. It says there in the book of Samuel, I will dedicate him to the Lord. 1089 and 1092, these words, Belah, Bilhan, it means to be afraid or fearful. Now, Enoch, when he's seen all the visions from God, he was so afraid and frightened that he collapsed. And there it says in the book of Enoch, there came a great fear upon me and my flesh trembled. All the stones, if you count them, 365. Now, these are the passages where Enoch lived to 65 years. He walked with God for 300 years. So these are the passages that capture those, all captured in the book of Genesis. Now, another site up the road, Windmill Hill, is 365 meters in diameter. So there's lots of other sites and measurements where 365 can be found. In regards to the division that the stones are making between 6 one side and 6 the other, and 12 portals, there in Enoch, the book of Enoch, he says, I saw 6 portals in which the sun rises and 6 portals in which the sun sets. Now, in regards to the sunlight moving between the stones and the fiery portals, there in book of Enoch he says, and I looked and behold, there were fiery portals in heaven. Another passage where he says, and I, Enoch, beheld the portals of heaven blazing with fire. There's another passage saying, then I saw openings and fire came out of them. So many passages speak of this fiery portals. If you take the height and the length of the stones, you can sum them up to 16 cubits. And it is the verse 16 where he says, the entire portal stood open before me. And one of the sun measurements is 140 degrees. In regards to the 12, the 60 divided by 12, the 12 portals, there is a circumference of 3,800 inches. Now, there's also 3,800 animal bones at the site. Now, 3,800 divided by 77, which is the distance to the heelstone, is equal to 49, the bearing that the heelstone is at. So this is just a demonstration of how numbers tie up here. And there he speaks of 12 portals open. The way Enoch describes this in his book, which is also what we are seeing at Stonehenge, is that in the summer, the day is divided into 12 parts and the night 6 parts, summing to 18. Now, in the winter, that swaps around. The winter then becomes 6 parts during the day and the night 12 parts, summing to 18. And the equinox, which is the midpoint, is 9 and 9. So it's balanced during the equinox, but they all sum to 18. Now, this is what Enoch describes in his book, and how the day and night are divided in 18 parts. Now, if you take a look at the stones in the center, you got this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now, 15 appears where Enoch describes the appearance of their lights till 15 days were accomplished. Then he speaks again, 15 parts of the light transferred to her till the 15th day. Now what's interesting is where he speaks of the moon, he describes the moon as a her, a she. Now if you watched my moon video, at the end of that video, I demonstrate how the measurements of the moon describe a bride. It's like the moon is thematically designed to be the bride of the earth. The earth is the husband, the moon is the wife, and they both stand before God the Son. So I just thought that's interesting. And you see these 4 stones down here. Enoch describes the 4 portions of the year. And there's also 4 stones outside the stone ring. The bearing angle to the heel stone is 49 degrees, and there Enoch describes this. He says, "And I in the first portal, 7 days it rises, and the second portal, 7 days it rises." So he speaks of the 7. If I calculate the volume between the uprights and the lintels on the top, standing across, you get a difference of about 0.97%. So it's very close. The measurements are very, very close. Now, 97 passage in the Bible speaks of Enoch being born. Now, Jared, which is Enoch's father, was 162 when he had Enoch. Now, the upright of the Saracen stones are 4.11 meters. That is 162 inches. The width of the lintel is also 7 cubits in length, and Enoch is the 7th generation after Adam and Eve. Now, the site at Stonehenge is sitting at 51.18 degrees north of the equator. Now, 518 is the passage where it says Jared was 162 when he had Enoch. So this is Enoch. So we have Adam and Eve, then we have Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, and Enoch. Now don't get confused because there are 2 Enochs. The first one was the evil one, who the son of Cain. Now Cain was influenced by Satan, and this is why the Canaanites had a lot of trouble. They ended up in Jericho until Moses came along and recaptured Jericho. The Enoch we're talking about here, the 7th from Adam and Eve, was like the better replacement. The year Enoch was born from Adam and Eve would have been 622 years, according to my calculation, 622. Now, if you measure the circumference, 99 plus 99, the circumference of 198 meters, is 622 meters. Now that year to us, 622 after Adam and Eve, it is 3317 BC. Now you can find 3317 if you take the South Pole and you subtract the chord surplus and you subtract. So the surplus with the South Pole is obviously going to be quite big because this site, Stonehenge, is so far north. So the surplus is going to be quite large, and if you subtract 364, you get 3317. Now the year Enoch was taken up by God from Adam and Eve was 987. 987 from Adam and Eve. And there is a measurement of 1,000, the surplus of 3,680 converted to nautical miles is 1,987. There is the 987. Now that year to us would have been 2,952 BC. 2952 can be calculated by taking the South Pole arc minus the chord surplus, and you add it to 300 and you add 365, you get 2952 BC. If you take the circle of stones, you calculate the circumference, you get 96.5 meters. If you take one of the stones, because it's arched, because the stones are curved, if you had to take one of the stones and straighten it and say, well, how much longer is it now than when it's curved? And you get 5.88 millimeters. A 588 is the Aramaic word for encircle, surround. And 965 is the midpoint between 962 and 969, which was Jared's age and the year Methuselah and the Great Flood happened. 588 is 84, which is Enoch's number, times 7. 588 can also be calculated if you took Methuselah's age, 969, and you subtract 381, which is another measurement in the story, you get 588. 588 is also the product of 12 and 49. The 33 meter diameter of the stones on the outside of the stones, 33 meters is 108 feet. Now, 108 is the number of chapters in the books of Enoch. Enoch's books are divided into 108 chapters each. The width of the healing stones, 2.4 meters, and it also calculates to 24 hands. So you got 24 come up here twice. Now, in Genesis 5:24, this is where Enoch walked with God and God took him. Now, Avebury is another site close by, and on the way to Avebury, there is this passage with 29 stones. It also has an azimuth of 29 degrees. Now, 29 is the product of 5 and 24. And Genesis 5:24, this is the passage where Enoch walked with God. And 29 is God is my Father. So this walk is depicting the walk that Enoch had with God down to Avebury, another stone circle close by Stonehenge. Now, the outer henge diameter is 347 meters at Avebury, and 347 is the passage in Psalm 34:7, where the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. Now, angels come into the story with Enoch. There are 7 angels that come to visit Enoch. These are the 7 angels. You've got Uriel, Raphael, Raquel, Michael, Saraquel, Gabriel, and Remiel. If you measure the surplus between Stonehenge and the North Pole, the surplus amount is 82 kilometers. Now, it is chapter 82 in the book of Enoch where he says he writes down the heavenly order. And Uriel is this angel that shows him the timing of the planets. Uriel's number in Aramaic is 248, and 248 is the angle with the earth converted into radians times the 366 books that Enoch wrote. Raphael's Hebrew number in gematria is 311. 311 can be calculated if you take the summer-sunset bearing and add it to the site's longitude position west. Raphael's Aramaic number is 311. 311 meters is the circumference of the 99-meter ridge around the outside of Stonehenge. Raquel's Hebrew number is 307. 307 is the inner diameter of the stone rings at Stonehenge. 330.72 meters. Raquel's Aramaic number is also 307. The Archangel Michael's Hebrew number is 4317, and it is 4,317 kilometers to the North Pole. Michael's Aramaic number is 101, and if you add the Aubrey hole, the 56 Aubrey holes to the 30 outer Saracen stones to the inner 10 trilithon stones, and the 5 that are standing on top of the trilithons, is 101. Saraquel's Hebrew gematria number is 641. 641 can be calculated if you take the winter sunrise bearing and multiply it by the number of the trilithon groups, 5, and you add it to the one healing stone, is 641. Saraquel's Aramaic value is also 641. Gabriel's Hebrew gematria number is 246. 246 can be calculated if you take the 141.7, if you take the measured angle of Stonehenge to the South Pole of 141 degrees and you multiply pi by 180, it is 246. 246 is the Hebrew gematria number for Gabriel. Gabriel's Aramaic number is also 246. Remiel, Hebrew gematria number is 281. 281 can be calculated by taking the winter solstice axis bearing of 229 degrees and add it to the site's latitude of 51 degrees, is 281. Remiel's Aramaic number is 281. 281, if you take the 360 and you subtract the sun's sweep across the sky of 78 degrees, is 281, the Aramaic number for Remiel. So let's take a look at Enoch's prophecy in the coming of Jesus, the coming of the Messiah. As I've demonstrated, the 358 degrees between Stonehenge and Greenwich Meridian around the backside is 358, Messiah. And if you calculate that ratio with a full 360, you get 9,950, very close to 10,000. And there it speaks, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints. The moon standstill sweep travels between 40 and 139.75 degrees. Now, the midpoint of that is exactly 90 degrees. 90 converted to gons. Gons is another unit of measure to measure angles and a full radius around the Earth. That is 100 gons. 100 squared is 10,000. There are other measurements to get to 10,000, but there Enoch writes, in Enoch 1 verse 9, he says, he comes with 10,000s of his holy ones. Stonehenge's latitude of 51 degrees. There in Enoch 51, he speaks, and the elect one shall arise. The summer noon altitude of the sun stands at 62 degrees. And in Enoch 62 verse 2, this is where he says, the Lord of spirits seated him on the throne of his glory. When considering other divine names like Yahweh 26 and Adonai 65, summing to 91, and 344 divided by the 4 seasons is 86 Elohim, God. We get many measurements that can bring us to these values that demonstrate God's name. 126, as I've demonstrated in Tiwanaku, 126 is the missing portion of the 2 stone tablets. When you study that shape at Tiwanaku, it's 126. Now here we find it again, 126. And the Greek number 126 is eternal. And Enoch writes about, their name shall be remembered forever and ever. There is also a reed count of 31.43 reeds, and 314 is Shaddai, the Almighty. And in Greek, it's to read and recognize by writing. And this is what Enoch wrote about. Read what is written and hear what is hidden. So in regards to the Earth's location of Stonehenge, Stonehenge is sitting at an angular distance of 38.82 degrees to the North Pole. Many calculations can be had to get to 364. And here Enoch speaks of 30 days, 5 years, and 364 days. So these are all key numbers in our stone count. There's 30 stones, there's 5 stones on top of the trilithon in the middle. Stonehenge's longitude position is 1.82 degrees west of meridian 0. So when you multiply that by 3,600 to convert to arc seconds, you get 6574, where it says Enoch lived to 65 years. And in Enoch 74, this is where he speaks of the moon's course and the moon's luminary law. So Enoch, as a writer, and his 366 books. In 1 Enoch 104, this is where he writes, books shall be given to the righteous and the wise. Now 344 is the distance to Orkney. Another site, another stone ring site, northwest, all the way up to Scotland. If you take 344 and you add it to the 22 letters of the Aramaic language and Hebrew, you get 366. 344 is also the unit of measure gons when it comes to the angle of 309 degrees, which is the site's axis angle, 309.3 degrees, converts to 344. So there's another way of reaching this value of 344 in the site. 821 is also a calculation that forms part of the healing stone's axis bearing of 49 degrees. That is 821 pi over 3000 in its simplest form. Now it is chapter 82 verse 1 where Enoch speaks, I have shown thee everything and have written down everything and not concealed anything of the works of heaven, their courses, their stations, their seasons and their years. Let's take a look now at the sun and the moon and the astronomical understanding. Now, as the light travels from summer to winter and revolves around Stonehenge, this is described in the book of Enoch. So what we have is the whole site sitting at a 180 degree axis. Now the moon pops up exactly opposite when the sun sets at 220 degrees. The moon rises at 49 degrees. Now Enoch writes about this. He explains how the moon rises and sets in these portals. He says 6 portals in the east, 6 in the west. Now the midpoint with the moon's northern standstill sits at 40.25 degrees northeast. When it travels to the southeastern extreme, moonrise, is 139. The midpoint is exactly 90 degrees. So Enoch writes, there I saw in the east a first appearing of small horns like the first appearance of the moon in the east, and the portal where the sun rises. With the stone count of 30 stones divided by 5, you get 6. Now 6 and 6 is 12. So we have 6 in the east, 6 in the west. And this is exactly what Enoch describes. 6 portals where the sun rises and 6 where it sets. The 364 calculation of 4 seasons times 91 days, 52 weeks and 7 days of the week is 364. So we see a sun's annual path of 364 days over Stonehenge. So the moon year in its 10-day shortfall. The moon is just behind the sun. In a year, it falls short by 10 days. Which is 354. And this is what Enoch describes. Let's take a look now at the heavenly ascent, the house, the portals, and the throne, and the glory. If you take the complete height of the stones, which is 10.5 meters, including the lintel on top, calculates to 20 sacred cubits. And it is Enoch 14:20 where he describes the great glory seat thereon. 106, Jesus' number, which I demonstrated earlier, can be calculated from the stone counts. It is chapter 104 verse 2 where he says, "Ye shall shine as the lights of heaven, and the portals of heaven shall be opened to you." Now, Jesus being the door and the opener of the door. It's interesting how 104 plus 2 sums to 106. And as we looked at earlier, this 1089 measurement describing the gate of heaven. Now, Enoch describes in chapter 14:18, "And I was taken up, and I came unto the east gate of the house of the Lord." So let's take a look now at the watchers and their judgment. If you take the outside stones, the 30 plus 30 plus the inner 10, you get to 70. And there's some other calculations that bring us to the value 70. Now, Enoch describes the watchers being bound for 70 generations. So we have fragments of this ancient text. And basically what it describes is how they descended, they swore an oath, they corrupted the earth, and they bound in judgment. So the earliest surviving Aramaic writings of the Book of the Watchers. So it describes how their leader, Samaeas, their leader, taught them sorcery, form of witchcraft. Now 20 chiefs. There were 20 chiefs, and basically there were two groups of 10. Each group of 10 had a leader, and there was two groups of 10, making a total of 20 leaders and 200 in total. We can calculate 200 from the stone count, and Enoch describes this in 1 Enoch 6:6, where he describes a whole number was 200. The healing stone distance to the front of the healing stone is 77.4 meters. Now, Enoch 7:7, this is where he describes the whole number of them being 200 and descended on the days of Jared. That's his father. So Enoch's father was Jared, and they descended on Mount Hermon. So there were 20 chiefs, 10 in each unit, making a sum of 200. There is an oath and the bindings, so 2 bindings and the watcher account. So there's a mutual oath, and then there is a second binding. So bound them fast for 70 generations. So the parallel with Stonehenge is that it's a continuous raised lintel ring forms a complete enclosure, a visual image of binding, separation, and restraint. The distance between Stonehenge and Mount Hermon has a bearing angle of 108 degrees and a distance of 3,600 kilometers to the actual site of Mount Hermon. Now, 108 is the Aramaic number for Azazel, one of the chief watchers. If we take the height of, we get 20, and this is the chapter where Enoch describes Azazel taught man how to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates. So like I've demonstrated, the 30 plus 30 plus is 70. 70 stones and 70 generations. Now, the raised lintel, the circumference of the center line is 316.6 feet. 126 in Greek is everlasting, and the watchers were kept in everlasting bonds. Aramaic name Shemihaza. Don't ask me to pronounce these names very well, but his number is 365. So if we look at how the northeast and the southwest sections are divided, it can bring us to this idea of the divisions, the 6 divisions, which they took wives. Azazel taught them shields and swords and ornaments. They corrupted all flesh with violence. They bound themselves by oaths. God sent the flood to destroy them in the time of Noah, and the giants perished and the earth was cleansed. So they swear oaths over it and bind them by imprecations and chasms. That's Enoch 72:1. Now Stonehenge to this far north Orcadian basin. This is apparently where the heel stone came from, north. Now, Enoch explains this. He describes things coming from the north. Now, the weight of the stone, being at 6,000 kilograms, divided by 30 kilograms, is 200. There's another way of calculating 200 from the stones. Let's take a look now at the apocalypse of weeks. So there is this great eternal judgment on the 10th week, and that's described in Enoch 91:15, and in Enoch 93:3, 7th in the first week. So we get these numbers 7, 7, and 10 stones from the site measurements and stone counts. So let's take a look now at the resurrection and restoration. So we have Brodgar, it has a diameter of 104 meters. And there in Enoch 104:2, that's where he describes, "Ye shall shine as the lights of heaven." A light from heaven is another way of describing resurrection. So Enoch is shown these 4 chambers of the dead. So when you die, you go to one of these 4 chambers, depending on what you did with your life. So the righteous go to the righteous spirits. It's a nice place. And the sinners wait their judgment. And the people who've been murdered, they crying out for justice in chamber 3. And 4, the lawless dead. There's 4 different sections that Enoch describes this angel showed him. Now, Maeshowe is another site, and it has these chambers inside it. And if you count the uprights and the side cells, you get to 70. And there's a barnhouse stone standing in front of it, which is 3.2, matching the 7 cubits. Now, this site, Maeshowe, has a latitude position on the earth of 58 degrees. Now, it is 58, chapter 58 in the book of Enoch, where he speaks of the light of the sun and eternal life. So what this site is doing is it's describing Enoch being 7th from Adam. It's describing the light of the sun and eternal life. And the 221 degree southwest axis is the light enters the chamber. Now, as that light enters the chamber, it gives us this idea where the spirits of the souls of the dead should be assembled therein, in the chambers. And the earth shall give back, and Sheol shall give back what it has received. So Sheol is this chamber of the dead, where your souls go. Now, in Enoch chapter 58:3, this is where he speaks of the righteous shall be in the light of the sun, and the elect in the light of eternal life. So let's take a look now at the earth, the dead, and the hollow places. So the Aubrey holes contained human ashes. Now with this 56 holes around Stonehenge that they found traces of human ashes, Enoch speaks of the earth opening up and swallowing up man. And this is described in Enoch 22:8. Where these hollow places have been created, and the spirits of the dead might be separated. So the pockets and the hollow places and the chambers of the dead, this can bring us to these passages where Enoch describes hollow places created and the dead might be separated. Now, Mount Pleasant 46. So in 1 Enoch 46, this is where Enoch describes, this is the Son of Man who hath righteousness. So the animal vision and the 70 shepherds. So the stone counts that sum up to 70. 70 also relates to this number of shepherds described in the book of Enoch in chapter 89. Now the flock and the sheep. So Enoch describes and says, and they built a house for the Lord of the sheep, and made all the sheep stand in that house. Now, 90% of the bones that they've found are pig's bones and 10% are cattle. Now, Enoch describes, he says in chapter 89, he says, a black wild boar begot many boars. And then the wild boars were devouring them. And then the wild boars devoured them. So basically, the black boars gave birth to other black boars and they ate everything. And then the black boars ate them too. And that sounds a bit like Satan's people. They want to kill you, and then when you're dead, they kill themselves. Now, Enoch also describes bulls that come forth from the earth. That bull was white, and the white bull was born with large horns. So Enoch describes in all these passages, even Enoch 86, he says, many stars descended from heaven and became bulls amongst the cattle. And most people believe what he's referring to, and I can somewhat agree, is that the white bull was Adam, Eve came along and she was the cow, Cain came along and he was the black bull, and Abel came along, he was the red bull, and later on Seth is the white bull. So Seth's line ultimately gave birth to the Enoch that we're talking about, not Cain's Enoch, Seth's Enoch. So let's take a look now at Noah and the flood and how these sites at Stonehenge are relating to Noah and the Great Flood. Now, the 77.4 meters between the front of the healing stone and the center of Stonehenge can be calculated to 150 cubits. Now, the 150 can relate to the number of days that it took for the water prevailed. The altar stone inside the Stonehenge site is 4.9 meters. Now, Enoch describes 490 years from creation to the time of flood, the Great Flood. It doesn't make sense to me because there's certainly a lot more years between the time of Adam and Eve and the Great Flood. So that's just something I'd have to look into. Now, Mount Pleasant, this This wooden henge is literally 66.6, as in 666 kilometers from Stonehenge, which is southwest of Stonehenge. 66.6 kilometers is this site. Now, this site it's oval, not perfectly round. The long way across is 370 by 320. Now, there are a total sum of 1,600 of these wooden stakes. There are 5 rings and 4 approaches, so 4 entranceways, and there is this conker barrow that is down here, and it's 30 meters wide. Now, Enoch when he describes Noah and the great flood, he says, "And I, Enoch, saw in a vision the Most High give commands to Noah, and he built a great ark, great measurements, a wooden building for the preservation of himself and the seed of life." Now, 200 times 8 is 1,600. Now, 200 watches times the 8 that was saved by the ark is 1,600. What's interesting is that 200, it is the watches that caused the problem, and the 8 was saved on the ark. In Enoch 25:4, I must read this to you. He says, "And the Lord said, As for you, Azazel, bind him hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and there place him, and cover him with rough and jagged rocks, and over him place bronze and iron, and in the valley of the desert place wooden stakes." Wooden stakes. That is the key word to this site. And here we see 1,600 wooden stakes. Now, Enoch describes wood in all 4 passages. The entranceway to Mount Pleasant has 2 odd-looking posts and a 17-meter wide ditch. Now, Enoch in Genesis 7:11, there it describes, "In the 2nd month and the 17th day of the month, in the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened." So Genesis 7:11, that's describing the great flood. Conker barrow is 30 meters wide, and 150 divided by 5 rings is 30. And there it describes as 150 days the water prevailed. Now 7:17, this main ditch is 17 meters wide, and Conker barrow is 7 meters high. And in Genesis 8:4 it describes the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day. Now, the outside diameter of this oval shape being at 370 by 320. Now, the days that Noah and his family were on the ark was 320 days. Now, that is a 50-meter diameter difference. And therefore, we have this 5:3 ratio. And there it describes in Genesis 6:15, "And this is the fashion which thou shalt make of it. The length of the ark 300 cubits, and the breadth 50 cubits, and the height 30 cubits." So this 5:3 ratio describing the cross-sectional surface. So Mount Pleasant has 4 entranceways and 4 central positions, summing to 8. And there were 8 people on the ark with Noah. Now 38 is the bearing angle between Stonehenge and Mount Pleasant. 38. Now 38 is the Hebrew number for moist, fresh water. And in Deuteronomy, describing the great flood, he says, "Turn you and take your journey into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea, and you shall compass the hill country of the Amorites 38 years. Now 38 million is also the surface area of the moon. 160 is the Aramaic number for wood or tree, and 320, the number of days that they were on the ark for, is 2 times 160. Now 666 is the number of wisdom. But anyway, this does come up in the book of Solomon, where he says, "Wisdom again saved the earth and delivered the righteous man whom she guided through the paltry piece of wood." So it's describing here as wisdom preserves the righteous survivor through the wood of the flood. Now, the fact that Mount Pleasant is sitting right between these rivers, and there Enoch describes, he says, "And I saw all the rivers of the earth, and the springs of the great deep, and the mountains of the earth, and the boundaries of the earth." So we got 5 timber rings, 4 approaches. I also got the 7-meter high mount. Now, Shem had 5 sons, Ham had 4 sons, and Japheth had 7 sons. So these are the children of Noah and how they match the site. I don't know if there's a section of the site that's burnt, but Enoch describes a great judgment and the renewal of their house. So I've not visited this site, and I would not take any of my images to be accurate because the AI generator is really difficult to work with. But anyway, we're getting there. Now, finally, Mount Pleasant's key alignments, some further alignments like the 320 days on the ark and the 1,600 wooden posts. Now, add them to the flood was 1,656 years. The 6-meter high post is matching Noah's age. 600 years. The 3 meters below, the 3 levels, the arc was 3 levels. The 43-meter site diameter of some of the ring patterns matches 82, the luminary order. The connecting local sites, I know we've discussed some of them already, but what I want to do is understand what's going on here with all the local sites and what they mean. Now, if you look carefully, you'll see that some of them look like raised mountains, some of them look like rivers or next to rivers, and some of them look like islands. Now, at one stage, I did sum a bearing up to 77, but I think that's wrong. I think the sum is something different, and that's because there's just so many sites. You don't know which to add, which to include, what not to. But anyway, Enoch describes this in Chapter 77, where he describes the 4 quarters of the earth. Then he describes the 7 high mountains, the 7 great rivers, and the 7 great islands. If you take a look at one of the sites, 2 of the sites, West Kennett, Long Barrow, and all the way up Scotland, Lone Head of Daviot, that's in the Scotland Highlands. Both sites have a bearing angle of 177 degrees. Now there in the book of Enoch 78:9, he describes in the first portal 177 days. So this is the moon's midpoint, is 177 days. Times 2 is 354, which is the full year moon cycle. Now 177 can also be measured with the 49-degree healing stone bearing from the center of Stonehenge, calculated in arc seconds. In arc seconds, it is 177. So we have this idea of 7 high mountains, 7 great rivers, and 7 great islands. Now, very quickly, I can identify 7 of these sites that have raised mountains, and 7 are right next to rivers, and 7 look like little islands or even on islands. Now, Normanton Down has these 7 disc barrows, and I saw 7 high mountains. So this is emphasizing the number 7. Windmill Hill is another site, and it has a 7-meter wide inner causeway, and it has these rings demonstrating an outer circuit, a middle, and an inner circuit. And it brings us to this passage where Enoch describes 7 high mountains, and this whole site is up on a mountain. Maeshowe, 7 meters high, and Newgrange is 12 meters high. So the 12 meters depicting the 12 months, the seasons and the years, and the midwinter sunset, seasons and years. Silbury Hill is also 30 meters in height, 160 meters in length, bringing us to a calculation of 364 cubits. And Fargo Long Barrow has an 82 meter width or length. So we have this idea also in Stanton Drew, being it right next to a river, explaining the courses of the river, the Great Sea, and the 4 rivers in Erythraean Sea. In Avebury, there are 4 passages coming in, from the east, the west, the north, and the south. So the passage that the 1 outer, the 2 inner, and the 4 openings sums up to 7. The passage that this refers to is, I saw 7 rivers on the earth, larger than all the rivers. Now, the West Kennett Avenue has 100 pairs of stones, summing up to 200. There's 200 stones on the West Kennett Avenue. And the other calculations of these stones sum up, there's 98 outer, 27 on the north inner, 29 on the south inner, and 200 on the avenue, which sums to 354, the number of days in a year for the moon, which is double 177. Now, the distance between Stonehenge and Avebury is 24.75 kilometers. We round that to 25. The 25th passage in the book of Enoch says, and they were all 200. Again, bringing us on this emphasis of this number 200. Avebury sits along this watercourse. Now, there's a chalk encatchment and a spring. And what's going on here, if you understand rivers in England, so there is a natural water system at Avebury, which is the source, the course, the direction, and the destination. Macri Moor is another island, and there are 11 stones, and 11 is the Aramaic number for island. And Enoch describes the islands and says, and 2 of the islands were with the land of the living, and 5 of them in the Great Sea. So Macri Moor's diameter is 18 meters. Now, 18 is the product of 12 and 6, which is the description of where Enoch gives us with the timing of the seasons, the day and the light, timing around the seasons. So let's take a look now at some global sites. This is Google Earth, and I've tried to zoom in like that. So this is where Stonehenge is, and this line here, this red and blue line, that is the direction that Stonehenge is facing, the doorway. The doorway faces this line. So what I thought was to create this so we can follow this line to see what it crosses over. So that might give us a good idea of what to look for. Now you'll notice that it passes very close to where the Atacama giant is. You should know from my other video that the Atacama giant represents Jesus' ascension into heaven. So when we look at this, if we can imagine a triangle that this line is forming, so the Atacama giant, it doesn't look like that. He actually looks more like that. Anyway, if we take that bearing and we look at the actual, so the red line is the actual line that would take us right over the Atacama giant. What we're going to look at is this triangle set up, the closest distance between the 2 lines, and the distance. Now the distance is 1,260 kilometers. 1260 is referenced in 2 passages in the book of Revelation. Now in Psalm it speaks of, thou hast ascended on a high, and he who ascended on the high, and Moses lifted up the snake, and the Son of Man must be lifted up. So the 1,200 kilometer distance between Stonehenge and the Atacama giant brings us to this idea, the parallel between Jesus ascending and Enoch ascending. Now the angle between the Earth center, Stonehenge, and the Atacama giant is 92 degrees, and the distance straight through the Earth between Stonehenge and the Atacama giant is 9,200 kilometers. So 9292. If you look at passages in the book of Mark 9:2, this is where it speaks. Jesus leadeth them up into the high mountain, and he was transfigured before them. So Revelations 9:2, this is where he says, and he opened the bottomless pits, and the smoke arose. It's about being elevated and rising. Now in nautical miles, it is 5,555 nautical miles. 555 is the Hebrew number for ladder. Now if we take a look at Stonehenge and King Solomon's temple. King Solomon's temple and Stonehenge form a 37-degree angle with the earth center. And it is in the book of Kings 6 verse 37 where he says, in the 4th year was a foundation of the house of the Lord. So one of the things that Enoch sees in the future is the building of the temple. Now the distance between Stonehenge and the temple is 2,000 nautical miles. And in the Bible it speaks of, there is this 2,000 bath capacity, Solomon's molten sea. Now the reverse azimuth between Stonehenge and the King Solomon's temple is 316. And there in 2 Chronicles 3:16 speaks of the 7 pomegranates on the chain and 7 on the other chain. So there's a 7-7 thing going on here again with the entranceway to King Solomon's temple, the south porch. Now Stonehenge to the Acropolis in Greece, there's a reason why I would use this as another site measurement. Now the distance between Stonehenge and the Acropolis is 2,480. Now 480 is the year the temple foundation. And that speaks in the book of Kings 480th year, in the month of Ziv, which is the second month, he began to build a house of the Lord. Stonehenge and the Acropolis has a 13.7 degree angle. Now, it's 13 weeks is the Enoch per season. 13 weeks per season that Enoch describes. Now, the sagitta between the surface arc and the chord between Stonehenge and the Acropolis is 120 kilometers. Now, that is Enoch's age, 65, that he lived for. So what is all this summing up to? What is going on here? Well, God promised signs and wonders. So every time God does a miracle, like the miracles he did for Enoch, he leaves a sign. And when God leaves a sign, he doesn't mess around. So all these sites in the UK, they're all matching up and aligning with the book of Enoch and the miracles God did for Enoch. Now also, there are many passages in the Bible that speaks of stones and standing up stones and pillars and standing pillars up and all these things. And these are all the passages where that is referenced. So it's an interesting study, and I'm pleased I've done this because there's some things that are in the book of Enoch which can help us understand the cosmos and the planets. What I find amazing is how Enoch can write this down and we only accept it and study it 4,000 years later. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and my BTI score got a score of 93%. Now, anything in the 90s is just about impossible. Okay, this BTI has also been updated to a revision 3.3. Now, what BTI is a weighted measuring process that can measures the accuracy, the measurements, the calculations, the source of information. It has a weighting process. Now, you can see that I've taken a total of 782 measurements to make this video. And of those, 332 are transformed into alignments, and 226 are promoted, and 78 are direct. Now, I could work on these numbers and build them up, but there's a point where I have to stop working and do the video, because with all these sites around the UK, there's just so many to look at and so many to crack, and they're not easy. So I appreciate if you give this video a like, share it with your friends, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.